I want to introduce you to Adrien Bron. He's a partner at Bain Company, one of the leading management consultants in the world. Adrien and I met probably 2, 3 years ago, Adrien, I think 2.5 years ago, at one of Bain's Service Circle events, where they bring in a bunch of service leaders. They have their own community in Europe. I was invited to speak at one of the events. And since then, we've had a chance to kind of exchange ideas, share ideas, and so on and so forth. So given some of the stuff that's going on, I thought it would be great to have Adrien come on and share his perspective, Bain's perspective, on where they see it. So with that, Adrien, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can bring up your screen if that helps. That'll allow you to drive this session a lot more smoothly. All right, so here we go, Adrien, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Vivek. Let me do the technicals here, and then thank you. And also you, Dave, from my side for the inspiration and remembrance of the some of the timeliness, some of the aspects of leadership, especially in performance culture, that are completely not changing over time, and the current crisis is a very a good time to remember that. My name is Adrien Bron. I'm as you said, Vivek, I'm a partner at Bain. What we do at Bain is we work with executives of different companies. We a lot of industrial and technology companies to help them overcome some of the challenges that you pointed, Dave, more specifically, and a lot right now, with one of the things that you alluded to, which is the convergence of physical and digital, and the implications for so many things, from the value proposition of technology and industrial companies, to the business models, to the operating model, organizational model, and people challenges that are coming out of this development. I'll not talk about generically about IoT and digital. I think you guys have enough readings and information of that. I'll try to bring in, since we are in a discussion around obviously entitled, try to bring it down to what are the implications of that convergence of digital and physical. You can call it differently. You can call it IoT. You can call it automation. You can call it I40. What are those implications onto the service businesses of companies like Honeywell, or like Baker Hughes, or like companies that are basically providing everything from pieces of hardware to equipment to full integrated solutions to make manufacturing and plants run better. The one thing we continue to be surprised about is to compare what is being forecasted by people like us, analysts, consultants, industry experts, and what actually ends up happening in the industry. We 10 years ago, everybody was looking at predicts. A lot of people were looking at GE. A lot of people were looking at the promise of complete automation and factories without lights that would very much run automatically. That obviously hasn't happened. However, what has happened is that so many things are completely different in the way an automotive plant runs today versus 2010 versus 2000, and I think you and I can agree to say that it's actually really difficult to forecast what will happen in terms of changes of balance of power or competitive landscape. But one thing is sure is the more data you have and the more information you have, the more you can do about it. And we are very bad at saying what we can do about it, but we actually are very good at saying that offers a lot of opportunities, and each and every one of you is actually, I think, in a situation asking himself or herself what that means for what the company is actually offering, where are the threats, where are opportunities, what do customer needs, and so on. So that what we what to be more specific, what we see, and this is a very complex page, but what we see is obviously that industrial players have entered a technology game, and a tech stack technology game, one where you see, companies like Google, obviously Amazon, companies, like Siemens, companies like Honeywell here, all the way to, sensors and all of the widgets that you need at the interfaces of digital and physical. So, most of the players that are in this call, I believe, would see themselves as, originating from the bottom. And from the bottom is not bad, but from the bottom is from hardware, right? Widgets, equipment, components, machines. And more, those hardware manufacturers are facing a landscape where, a competitive landscape where, and in a business ecosystem more broadly, where, the threats are not coming from the other hardware manufacturers, right? We are beyond the time where the 2 or 3 industrial automation player, ABB, Siemens, Rockwell, and Honeywell, would be, fighting against each other. And we are in a time where all of those 4 actually are, thinking about what levels of partnerships and acquisitions are needed in other layers of this technology stack. What needs to be done in software and analytics? What can be offered in terms of, solutions or advanced services? And then they end up competing with companies that are software players. They end up partnering, with companies that are SAP. They end up doing things that service providers are doing, and that broadening of the competitive landscape for technology and industry hardware manufacturers is a very important change that we see in every sector. We see this in industrial automation, as I was mentioning, but we see exactly the same in building products, right? So if you are a provider of a light bulb or an elevator, or let's say, a lock solution or an access solution, your business model will be radically, or is currently radically changing. The hardware is being obviously commoditized, and more value add and opportunities are emerging by moving up the stack. But moving up the stack is very difficult and takes a lot of time and is a long road. What that would mean, we think is that, as if you look at, let's take a Baker Hughes, right? If you look at the profit pool of Baker Hughes today, or it could be GE, about half, in some situation a bit less, of the profit is made by selling, I'll call that hardware or equipment, selling stuff, right? A bit more than that is typically made by selling, as you said, also and pointed to, David, spare parts, service, consumables, that is supporting the equipment over its lifetime. That's typically with different shades of, a bit more equipment, a bit more spare part, a bit more service. That's typically how for our industrial and technology clients, how the financials look like. And if we think about what I was just saying, in the sense of those players are entering a new competitive arena with software providers and technology integration, we think that this profit pool will be typically changing. So 2025, to put a number in our mind, the profit made from selling stuff or equipment will be significantly lower for most of the people in this call. The profit made from selling spare parts with things like 3D printing and other companies that are specializing in distribution, not to talk about parrots, will likely be put under attack. What will, however, continue to expand is life cycle services under some conditions, however. And then there are additional things that additional source of business and required source of business that come from system integration, as well as the partnership to offer the technology or the connectivity infrastructure. What I would like to discuss with you is what we see as imperatives in order to capture that life cycle service opportunity. And the change from, let's say, after sales to service is a topic of 2020 to 2010. The topic of 2010 to 2020 to us was the shift from service to solutions, and the challenge that we will see going forward is how to automate and digitize those solutions to make them, to protect and differentiate against other competitors that typically come without the legacy of the hardware, right? Software only providers that aggregate data used from many robots and are able better than, let's say, Fanuc to provide preventive maintenance services on how, let's say, BMW uses Fanuc robots. That's to us the key challenge that in this constellation, service providers or industrial and technology service providers are facing. The implications for service are mostly three things. The focus that you guys have today is the focus on your own installed base, on your equipment. Sometimes it's a bit broader, and there are players that go way beyond that in this call, I realize. So a very, I would call it equipment-centric service model, right? Making the equipment better, servicing the equipment, providing upgrades, providing maintenance, and providing repairs in a timely fashion. That focus, as things are integrating and hardware is being more and more controlled by common control systems and common software on MES software, for example, will be more and more difficult, and therefore it will be important and needed to broaden the scope of the services that you are offering. With that, domain know-how and process understanding will be very critical. And in fact, we see the leading OEMs are the ones that are able to select the applications in which their equipment is used. And in those applications, there are usually thousands of applications, but able to say in those 5, 10, 20 applications, we want to, better than the operator himself and better than anybody else, understand how our equipment is used. Because we know it's not about our equipment, but it's about the process in which it is installed. The second change is that the service business arguably has been a rather analog business, right? This is a repair business. It was very much a spare parts business. Bits of technology, and Title is an example thereof, supporting and digitizing the delivery of the business in the sense of improving the connectivity to the installed base, improving the repair processes, being able to obviously read and process data from the machine with regards to usages and usage patterns. That focus on a rather analog with exceptions will dramatically shift towards a focus where analytics will be the sources of the value proposition, right? So not only getting data, most of you get data from the equipment and the install base, but basically understanding data and by being able to analyze this better than the user and than other competitors. And then finally, the service business with that will change from mostly a one-off business. Service contracts and one-off transactions are still 80% of the revenue and service from industrial and technology players, to a much more performance-based business. And the power by the hour thing is something that you and I heard 20 years ago. And the reason why power by the hour was not broadened too much into the industrial and technology landscape is because, with few exceptions, the OEM didn't control well enough how their equipment were used. And with that connectivity, you guys will be able to understand better than the user and better than others, if the equipment is faulting because of a usage mistake, if it is faulting because of an overload, or if it is faulting because of a lack of maintenance. And that analytical insight will allow, to change the monetization model of service and go way beyond and go way in the direction of performance-based and outcome and guarantees. If we ask, our clients and the people we work with in service, and if we measure two things. If we measure the share of the service revenue that fulfills these three criteria, broader the scope than the equipment, analytical-based insights, and monetization model based on performance or outcomes, it depends a lot across the companies, but roughly 20% of the revenue is we say in that advanced service model format, and 80%, as I was saying, is still time and materials and some types of frame service contracts. In 5 years, half will result. This will have tremendous implications on how companies will need to manage those offerings, train their people, manage the risk associated with it, and basically shift from CAPEX suppliers with an after-sales business to solution providers and OPEX partners to the users of the equipment. The share of models that will be based on outcome and based on performance will grow also, tremendously to roughly a third of your revenue. What to do? It obviously really depends on what equipment or what maturity level you are in. When we go across our customer base and our client base and look at what those most successful company do with regards to changing their service model in response of increased connectivity and digitalization, and a couple of things I pointed on already, but identify and select the applications or the processes and the pain points of the customers by using your equipment out of the forest of use cases that your equipment is being put into is really critical. And therefore differentiating, understanding that for a packaging company in the food industry, a lot of value will come from the ability to trace what is being packaged all the way so that the customer can understand where the content of the package comes from and what the supply chain journey of that package was, is a very important feature versus generic insight on, load that the package and number of packages that the machine is actually producing per day. Investing in analytics capabilities is a very important thing. It's actually a bit more difficult than what we just say here, because the best analytical talent will not join, typically, industrial and technology providers. They will go to Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And the war for talent in analytics and also the acquisitions is important. I'll talk about risk and pricing. So being able to develop, from a CAPEX type of business with an offer, with a negotiation and with a deal, to a recurring business model and all of the infrastructure that is required for that is a third area that leading players differentiate in. And then finally, moving from pilot to scale is the last one, because we see and you read and I read so many examples of very successful things. But if you really measure the financial impact of that, these have been point solutions. And being able to do such a transition of the service model in a way that is scalable is really, really, really critical. I'll pause it here. I'll pause it here if there is any questions or comments. I'm happy to take them. And maybe before that, I'll open also for you guys to reach out to us. We, together with some of the companies and also some of the companies in this call, we have a service circle in which we offer a platform for dialogue and exchange on the topic that I've covered today and a bit more and others with regards to offering, supply chain, and so on. We do a lot of benchmarking across companies to understand trends and implications of changes in competitive landscape. It's typically 1 or 2 times a year. And I would like to invite some of you that want to deepen any topic related to the change of customer service to reach out and join that.
Excellent. Well, Adrien, that was superb. Thank you very much. There's a couple of things that stand out in my mind, and there's a couple of questions that came into us earlier that I'm going to have my colleague DJ in India get ready to ask you. But the couple of observations you made was a little scary, right? So you talked about when you showed that chart where you talked about the equipment and the spare parts and so on and so forth, where you said in the next few years the profit, that profitability is going to go down dramatically on the equipment side. And even in the spare parts, it's going to go down, right? People have been making a lot of money on those two buckets so far, especially the spare parts piece. If I were to ask you the same question that I asked Dave earlier, again, these are almost terrifying transitions for many people, right? So the ability for leadership to kind of put the right things in place is hard. Are you seeing some good examples, Adrien, in not just in your work at Bain in Europe, but across the industrial landscape that you guys play in? Anybody making this transition better than others? Because this is a hard transition, right?
No, yeah, absolutely, Vivek. It's hard. It's a hard transition, but it's one full of opportunity because spare parts as a standalone goes down, but spare parts are required to provide life cycle services. So, the key is bundling and the key is offering design. We see companies that have been very successful at protecting the spare parts business by not looking at it as a spare parts business, but obviously by looking at it as a key component, along with intelligence, with technical know-how, and with availability of field force to improve the processes and the operational efficiency of the equipment used at their in the plants. So and that Vivek is I think the key to think about that, the opportunity in shifting from a CAPEX plus spare parts and a bit of service to model that is based on helping the manufacturer and using the equipment more effectively is bigger than the threat in the margin pressure and the pirates on the spare parts business. The spare parts has been a cash cow that some of the worst OEMs have milked, but the spare parts is a vehicle to provide a recurring relationship to your customers, and you need to add a value add on this, which is one that comes from domain know-how and process expertise.
Yeah, I love the fact that you said that spare parts provides an opportunity, an avenue for recurring relationship. That's really good. Hey, DJ, what questions do you have that have come in that you want to just quickly pose to Adrien?
Thank you, Adrien, and thank you, Vivek. I think the very first question was, this healthy skepticism. You just brought that up. The question was around, how many examples do you see of this business model? Is it still a myth? We've covered that. So I'll move on to something that Adrien just covered at the very end. Great point about the best talent in analytics going to the IT companies. So where should industrial OEMs begin with, or what areas should industrial OEMs begin with as they start their own analytic journey, given that they may not necessarily have access to the best talent in the market?
That's a good question. I think it depends on, yeah, that's a good question. The reality is that I think it does a bit depend on where you are located. I've seen companies in the Nordics of Europe, in South America, in India, that have been really, really good at hiring very strong software coding, data modeling, and analytical I would say analytical intelligence talent. I think it's harder if you are in Texas or if you are in California. So the talent pool is very local. So that's not a generic problem. But I think it's a generic problem, but I think the solutions depend a bit on where you're located and where the surrounding talent pool is. What I've found very interesting is that companies create hubs, right? They create different entities, they create different companies, they create different brands, to host and basically attract that that talent, and not hire 3 data scientists and put them into the shop floor, which will never work, and those guys will leave. So there are organizational models. There, it depends on your location, and I think the third point is also that a lot of it has been achieved through partnerships, and I think the most successful companies are not the ones that have only, and I insist on the word only, hired software and data talent into the ranks, but have done that and as well have established partnerships for typically in the construction and the building space, right? Think about the partnerships between Danfoss, Schneider, Assa Abloy, and a couple of other OEM that work together with building management software providers to develop what I think is called the building ecosystem, or the connectivity ecosystem for the building. So those level of partnerships, and then also screening and managing those partnerships, maybe are a bit of a workaround to that talent problem.
All right.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Hey, DJ, there's a question up on the screen there on the Q&A panel. You want to read that one? Or?
Yep, I'm just going to read that one out. So this one's from James Feely. James says, I'm definitely seeing a push toward remote monitoring and the benefits to both the customer and to my service. Do you price and charge for the remote access, or do you use it more as a way to reduce your own costs by avoiding sending a tech to the site? Different products will have more or less remote interaction, causing a challenge on how to price this new service.
I love this question, James. It's an excellent question. How to monetize remote monitoring. I was working with an elevator company who told me the following. I found it interesting. If all elevators are remote monitored and largely remote services, as we are doing 70% of our profit from sending technicians to the building to do the yearly maintenance, are we not killing ourselves with digitalizing the service business? I heard that 7 years ago. That question, I think, is a bit of a myth. First, remote monitoring will not suppress the need for service. It will, however, not bring a new wave of revenue, right? And typically, remote monitoring is more a tool to make sure that your service business is kept captive, and than it is to simply price this remote monitoring at a certain value. The value we see in remote monitoring is that it creates the platform, and that's the same than spare parts, for a service relationship that can be expanded over time. So, we have done an analysis where for a building product provider, the service growth of connected and remote monitored equipment was compared to not connected equipment, and it was very clear that the remote monitoring relationship was, the driver of additions and expansion of a service relationship. More upgrades, more extras, larger win rate in follow-on modernizations. And those are I would say, the auxiliary benefits of remote monitoring, which is why we talk about advanced services and lifecycle services, and not only about remote monitoring, because remote monitoring only it costs. It doesn't bring a lot of revenue. It allows you to make your operations more efficient, more planable. But financially, this is not a big change. The big change is what comes on top of that.
That's a great point, and we can go more into depth on that one. But unfortunately, we're going to be out of time now. But I think your point was interesting, right? Today, most of the people use it as a way to manage costs. They don't get the upside. But I think the hidden point behind what you said is being constantly connected or in touch with your customer really is enhanced by this notion of remote service. And what you do on top of that and with that is really what's going to set you up for success.
Yeah,
so really good point. Really good
Absolutely.
point.
I think this is exactly where I believe that Entitle is on the right spot here, because that connection to the installed base is something that is so, I would say, important in creating that life cycle relationship. And honestly, the reality is, and you guys know it much better than I do, but the reality is that most of installed base and potential is completely unknown still today for most of you. And I know there are exceptions, but that customer relationship, when I will extend it, Vivek, to installed base relationships, is really the right platform to build on.
Excellent. Well, Adrien, listen, really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. I know it's late in the evening in Zurich today, so I appreciate your time with us and the examples, and you've definitely given everybody here something to think about. So we appreciate your help today.